Welcome to Lead Every Day. We are excited to be joined tonight by people from all over the place for this live stream event. It's our first one, and I just want to say welcome. I got Mark Miller here with me. We'll tell you more about him in just a second, but we're excited that you joined us, and we'll hang out here for just a second. I mean, I know we got people still joining us.
We got folks coming in. Let them in. Doors are open.
I'm glad the doors are open, and we're good to go here. Got us a fire built. It's a good cold night outside here in Atlanta. I know it's kind of crazy. We've canceled school the last couple of days here. I think it's been about 50 degrees. They're playing football in Buffalo with a couple of feet of snow. We're canceling school with 45 degrees. So we're excited. We got a good warm night here. People coming in. Love for you to tell us where you're from in the chat there. We're going to have a great conversation tonight with Mark as we think about this topic of uncommon greatness. We've started this journey together, really. Mark and I have over the last few months, and I'm fired up about that. It's going to be a lot of fun to talk about that. Mark, a few months ago, he retired from his job. I know it's a good story. He retired from his job at Chick-fil-A. Mark's been a great leader there, executive there for a long time, helped with their leadership development. And I was at your retirement party, and you made a statement that day I thought was really good. You said you don't retire from a calling, you retire from a job.
That's right.
So I know our calling is to serve leaders, to equip and encourage leaders. That's what we're here for tonight. And so we're gonna do that tonight.
Yeah,
so
this will be a new format for us. We're excited about it.
It'll be a lot of fun. Good. So,
and we get to talk about the new book. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves.
We are going to get to talk about the new book here in just a second. We're going to get started here in just a couple of minutes. Give people still another minute or two. We've still got people coming in, but we're fired up to hang out. So you doing okay? You ready for this
I'm
new
doing
year?
Good. Our whole family's been sick, and so I got me some hot tea.
You got the hot tea going. We got the fire going.
Yeah,
we're trying to keep them warm. We got a blanket over here.
I'm on the rebound.
You're on the rebound.
I'm on the rebound. I'm going to make it.
It's gonna be really good. Well, let's dive in here. I want to just say, first of all, welcome to Lead Every Day. I want to tell you about Lead Every Day for a second. We, for the last decade, have been trying to help leaders under the banner of Integrate Leadership. We made a shift really just this last summer when Mark retired. I said, hey, you want to come and help us do what we're trying to do. We've been serving leaders everywhere, coaching, training. We speak for teams and organizations everywhere. And I knew that's what you were going to do. And so we have partnered up here. We're really excited about that. And we got a lot of cool things planned for this year. We'll have events all over the place. Think about 100 events we're going to do live around the country, around the world, not just in the country here, but that'll be fun. And we got all kind of coaching going on and everything. But one of the things
launching a couple of books.
We're launching a couple of books. That's what I wanted to talk about. We're excited about these books, and in particular this new book that you got coming out called Uncommon Greatness. I've been chasing greatness for a really long time.
Your whole life.
I'm fascinated by this idea of maximizing our potential and being the best we can. But we have talked for years about how you define greatness, and that really is kind of what we're going to talk about tonight. So I can't wait to dive in here. We'll call this the launch of a brand maybe, but really it's the launch of this book. The next few weeks, February 27th, Uncommon Greatness is coming out, but it's been in the works for a while. Tell us about a little bit. Just give us a little backstory.
So let me begin with the title. I believe the team that worked on this project reached the conclusion that greatness is a wonderful thing. And as you said, you've been chasing it your whole life, but I know you, and you define it a little bit differently than the rest of the world. And we did too. See, we believe there are two forms of greatness: common greatness, which is inspiring, and uncommon greatness. And there's some differences. If you think about common greatness, it's really about the achiever. And uncommon greatness is focused on others. Uncommon greatness is often unnoticed, where common greatness is often recognized in the spotlight and in the arena. You think about common greatness really is about what the individual can achieve and a demonstration of personal excellence, but uncommon greatness elicits greatness from others. And one more, I mean, I could go on and on and on. Common greatness is really fleeting. I mean, just think about the heroes of the past, and you can name very, very few of them. But uncommon greatness is enduring, and it lasts. So we said we want to talk about helping leaders set a higher bar, set a higher standard, and make uncommon greatness their pursuit. And so that's really what this book is about.
Yeah, that's going to be so great. I can't wait for people to read it. I've had a chance to read it, and I'm so fired up about it. We've said for years that greatness is about not just how can you achieve what you're capable of. That's great, but can you help other people? And I know it's all rooted really in this idea of servant leadership, and you've really talked about great leaders being people who serve. And so as we think about this book, really it goes all the way back. A lot of it does almost 25 years now, Mark, to when you guys were thinking about your point of view at Chick-fil-A, and you came up with what's called the SERVE model.
Yeah. So let me unpack that, because I think, like so many great stories, there's an amazing backstory, and this book, I think, qualifies, because we literally began this work a quarter of a century ago. And let me set the stage for you. I was working on the corporate staff at Chick-fil-A. I was about 20 years into my career. You didn't mention that I worked there about 100 years. Truett Cathy, the founder, actually hired me. I was the 16th corporate employee, and I began working in the warehouse and the mailroom. So I have seen that organization transform over many, many decades. But about 25 years ago, we had a problem. We needed more leaders. Now, I don't know if your organization has ever been there or not. It's not a good place to be, because here's what I've seen happen over and over again in our organization and in organizations around the world. When you have a problem to solve or an opportunity to seize, you want to put a leader on it, which makes perfect sense. Well, about 25 years ago, we had both problems to solve and opportunities to seize, and we looked over our shoulder and realized that our leadership bench was not adequate. And so what do you do in the short term? You give those problems and opportunities to existing leaders, which works smashingly well in the short run. But long term, it's a recipe for disaster. And I give full credit to our executive committee. They understood that might be a short-term solution, but that was not the answer. And so they asked me to try and figure out how to accelerate leadership development. Now, I think I know what you would do given a similar assignment. You probably do exactly what I did. You put together a team of really talented people. I put the smartest people in the room together, and we said, hey, how do we accelerate leadership development? And to make a long story short, we decided that our starting point needed to be a common, unifying, working definition. We didn't agree on what leadership looked like. We didn't agree on what leaders did, which made it exceedingly difficult to develop them. Because marketing developed them one way, and accounting developed them another way, and field operations developed them another way. And it was just chaos.
And I think this is interesting. Maybe it was pre-Google when this happened, but you told me at the time there were over 6,000 published definitions of leadership. So you just can't. You got to pick one.
You have to forge a consensus.
Exactly. And so you guys decided to come up with your own point of view on leadership
to do the work.
To do the work.
And so that work yielded, I would say, two big outcomes, and we're gonna really go deep in one of those, but I don't want to miss the first one. One of the things we concluded is that a picture would help us. And so we adopted the iceberg as our picture of leadership. And I don't know if you remember fifth grade or not, but they tell me we studied icebergs, and about 10% is above the waterline and about 90% is below. And we think that's the same with leaders. The skills of a leader are easy to see. They're the 10% above the waterline, and they're important. They matter. But what's going to ultimately determine your success as a leader is that 90% below. And that's the heart of a leader. And so we actually think both are essential. You really don't have an iceberg if you have just half or parts of it. And so we began to go to work and say, what are those fundamentals that are required of leaders, both above and below the waterline? And that's what we've talked about in this book. And I think we're going to unpack that at a really high level. We're going to go through those here tonight.
We are going to do that tonight. And we're excited that you've joined us tonight. As I'm looking over our list of people, we got people from Philadelphia. We got them North Carolina. They're all out west. We got people from all over. Probably a lot of cold places. Not too cold here, but we still have the fire, which is great. We have people from Australia on here tonight. So I mean, I guess it's not tonight. Maybe it's tomorrow afternoon.
Or maybe it's yesterday. I don't know.
I'm not sure either. It's summertime over there, so they're not worried too much about it. That's right. So we have people from all over the world. It's great. And as you're participating tonight, we want you to participate. I would encourage you, if you have questions about what we're talking about, go ahead and throw those in the chat at the end. We're going to have a little bit of Q&A. We'll get you out of here within an hour, but we're going to have a little Q&A at the end after we unpack some of those. So if you've got questions to what Mark's talking about, feel free to share those as we go. But let's take this model and give them a taste of these, what we call 5 fundamentals of leadership. These really are the job description of any leader of a family, leader of a company, leader of a team, business, school. Doesn't really matter. These 5 fundamentals really are a great starting point for any leader.
They matter. And I want to connect some dots with something I said a moment ago. We said this is really about the pursuit of uncommon greatness. I don't want to miss this. There's only one path to uncommon greatness, and it's uncommon leadership. And so these fundamentals aren't just the fundamentals. They're the fundamentals to excel. They're the fundamentals to experience true greatness, uncommon greatness. So the first fundamental.
Give me some of that. That's what I was going to say. Give me some of that.
The first fundamental is to see the future. This is when you take the threads of what you know and the things that you want to be true, you weave them together to create a compelling picture of the future. Leadership always begins with a picture of the future. That's what this first fundamental is about. You've got to help answer questions for people such as, what are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to become? What are we trying to accomplish? Why does it matter? Why does it matter? Yeah. So this is a critical and essential part of the leader's role. Now, I've been asked for decades, is this the most important of the fundamentals? Well, let me quickly say they're all fundamental, like blocking and tackling in football, which is more fundamental, but you actually have to do both. But I will say this, it is probably first among equals because leadership always begins with a picture of a future. If you're not trying to help people and organizations move to a preferred future, then I would argue by definition, you're actually not leading. Now, one cautionary note, and I know I've got to be careful. We can't go deep on these. We want to cover all 5 at a high level. But I see far too many leaders in the world who forfeit their leadership and they forfeit their agency by assuming that someone else will take care of the vision thing. They assume it's their boss or their boss's boss or the CEO or some national or geopolitical leader. And yes, all of those men and women need to demonstrate leadership by articulating a preferred picture of the future. But I would say any area that you want to exert influence over, you need a preferred picture of a future. If you're a frontline supervisor, then your time horizon certainly narrows. It shortens, and you would be concerned about the shift that you're leading. Or if you're at the next level in an organization, maybe you're concerned about the monthly P&L. Or if you're at the next level, maybe you're concerned about quarterly earnings. And again, if you're the CEO, your timeline may be 5 years, 10 years into the future. But every leader at every level needs to see the future. You can't forfeit your leadership by abdicating this critical responsibility.
Yeah, so for those of you who are listening, I want to encourage you tonight to begin to think about your vision for what it is you're leading. And I would say this, I tell leaders this all the time. If that's fuzzy to you, it'll be blurry to the people who are following you. You got to make sure that you can see it. If you can't see it, you can't take people there.
Right.
And so it starts with that picture. And one thing you can do practically tonight, I mean, I would encourage you to just say, what do you want to be true a year from today that's not true today? I think that's just a great little simple way to start. We've got all kind of stuff that you could do, but this idea of starting with a real picture of what you want to be true, pick a time. I mean,
I was going to say, I want to up the stakes a little bit. If you want to stretch yourself, say, what do you want to be true in a decade that's not true today? And then live to make that true.
Yeah.
My favorite Peter Drucker quote, some of you have heard of Drucker, the famous management and leadership thinker. He's passed away now, but I would say the greatest leadership thinker of the last 2,000 years. And my favorite Drucker quote is, the best way to predict the future is to invent it.
Yeah.
I just updated my 30-year plan.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've been great about having a 30-year plan, and you do know how old you're going to be in 30 years, but that's good. You're just getting started.
I'm just getting started.
I love that we're thinking long-term, not just a year from today, 10 years from today. Some of you, we got a bunch of young leaders on here tonight. You need to be thinking 30, 40 years. There's legacy stuff on the line with this vision piece. So that's fundamental.
That's the first fundamental.
Number one. It's and
it's
again,
huge.
they're equal.
I know.
So there are some really other important fundamentals. Let's talk about the second one.
The second fundamental is engage and develop others. And this is when you help the people you lead care deeply about their work, their coworkers, their customers, and the organization, while fueling their growth along the way. That's really the essence of engagement. How much does somebody care? And I'll just add this parenthetically. The data on this is awful, whether it's Gallup or ADP or any of these world-renowned organizations that monitor engagement. Somewhere between 50 and 25%, depending on which report you look at, of the American workforce is fully engaged at work. And that is not a reflection of the American worker. That's a reflection on us as leaders, and we can do better.
Yeah, a lot of times people don't really leave their job; they leave their leader. I mean,
I think the data's been clear on that a long time.
It really has been. And so think about that. If 70% of your people really don't care about what you care about, it's really hard to do some great stuff. So this idea of engaging and developing people, talk to us a little more about that.
Well, again, there's a lot that could be said, and we will say in the months and years to come. But if you want to engage people, you have to connect with people. You've got to affirm people. You've got to give them real responsibility. I mean, there are any number of strategies and tactics that you can employ, but and you've said this before, you've really got to care about people if you want them to care.
Yeah.
And so, again, I don't want to make that sound too simplistic. Yeah. It's real work. It's real work. But there are many, many organizations. I'm so thankful to have been part of Chick-fil-A for all those decades, where engagement scores are really, really high because we make it a priority.
Yeah, that's good. So as you're listening tonight, do you have somebody that you look at and you're like, I'm not sure they're leaned in as much as they could be? Maybe that would be a place where you would say, I need to give a little attention to this person. And I always say that people need to be validated more than they need to be tolerated. Sometimes I think we have this payroll, we got all these people, and if we're not careful, we forget to really see people, to encourage people, to affirm people. So maybe somebody this week would come to mind that you could really lean into and try to help them get better, to engage and develop them. All right, so we got two fundamentals. I know we're in a changing world, Mark. It's the speed of change is kind of crazy, but this third fundamental really will help people really when it comes to this idea of change. So, so talk to us about fundamental number 3.
Fundamental number 3 is to reinvent continuously. And this is when you routinely escape the bounds of the present and the known in pursuit of improved skills, methods, and outcomes. This is when you are intentional about making things better. And what do you always say about better?
Better is always different.
Better is always different. I'll say it another way. I heard this from Andy Stanley years and years and years ago, is that progress is always preceded by change.
Yeah.
And so leaders, change is our job. Unfortunately, far too many leaders look at change as a burden or an obstacle or a nuisance. It's like, no. We're supposed to create and sustain positive change in pursuit of results. I mean, we need to come back to, it's not change for change's sake. It's change in pursuit of improved skills, methods, and outcomes. That's why you change, because you've got a vision you're pursuing.
Yeah, there's a, I know you talk about this. You've got 3 little ways that we can reinvent. Give them a sneak peek of that. Like, what are the 3 ways? If somebody was
the 3 domains. We talk about the 3 domains.
Like really wanting to reinvent. Like, what are some ways?
And we did this to provide some hooks, because reinvent continuously it sounds
pretty broad,
big, and it sounds like a consulting phrase, and okay, granted, but it's a powerful concept. So think about it like this. What could you do to reinvent yourself? What knowledge and skills do you need to pursue to make you better in the future.
Yeah, we might ask, what do you need to be different about you a year from today? That,
right.
You know, that something different that's
right.
not true today.
So self. Second is systems or work processes. If you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always gotten, or worse, right? I meet too many leaders that think hope is a strategy. We ask them, what are you going to do to improve this? Or what are you going to do to improve that? Or what are you doing about your biggest problem? And if the first word out of their mouth is hope, I'm not betting on them. I mean, hope's a good thing.
Yeah, maybe things will change.
No. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
And often the systems and work processes have to change, because you've always said your current systems, work processes, behaviors, and beliefs are perfectly aligned with the outcomes you're now getting.
Yeah.
Even if you're a student and you're getting C's, well, the way you're studying, right? The amount of sleep you're getting, those kind of things are generating your current results. And you want different results, you got to change something. Yeah. So it's self, it's systems, and finally it's structure. And far too many leaders don't look at structure because they say they don't control structure. So all of a sudden the structure becomes their prison. And it's like, well, maybe you can't change it, but if the structure's the problem, you need to influence it. So those are 3 domains that we talk about in the book. And let me say this, on all of these, we're really just doing a 50,000 foot flyby here.
For sure.
In each of these, we devote an entire chapter to best practices, strategies, and tactics. Scores of them. I need to count them. I bet there are hundreds of them in the book. Very, very practical and tactical things that you can do around each of these fundamentals.
Yeah, that's good. So when I talk to leaders everywhere, and actually there's a study that was done, we had a couple thousand leaders that were asked, which way does your boss lean when it comes to results and relationships? And we found that less than 1%, that'd be less than 20 out of 2,000, said that my boss is both results and relationships. Fundamental number 4 is about this idea. It's a very important skill that leaders have to understand the power of both of these. We talked to us about
the best leaders. The best leaders. The 4th fundamental is to value results and relationships. And there's an inherent tension for most of us. There's a small percentage that God gave them an equal measure of both naturally, without any effort. It's just they think about both.
Yeah.
Now, some of you may say, am I results oriented or relationship oriented? Well, if you really don't know, ask 3 people that work with you or live with you, and they'll tell you the answer, because most of us have a bias. Now, if you don't, you should celebrate that, because this part of leadership will be easier for you than for me and about 98% of the other leaders, because we have a natural bias. We show up either thinking about results or thinking about relationships. So what this fundamental really is about, it's about navigating the challenge of honoring the people that we lead while ensuring sustained levels of elite performance. And so you actually have to figure out, even though you're probably not going to change your natural wiring or temperament, it's how do you value both?
Yeah, and I think sometimes, Mark, that the tendency is, if I'm a relational person, is to surround myself with relational people, and I'm very comfortable with that. Or if I'm a results person, if I get a bunch of people with a checklist, we're all going to, we're going to conquer everything. How do we compensate for that bias?
Okay, so you just gave a great illustration. So here, I love this because I tell people it's a 2-step process, and I'm a simple guy, so I love a 2-step process. First is you need to own your bias. Just admit it, and don't defer, deflect, defend, make excuses. Just say, yes, I am more results oriented, or I am more relationship oriented. But you can't stop there. The second step in the process is to compensate. I often describe it like wearing glasses. A leader that wears glasses is not a lesser leader. I'd say they're pretty smart, because they figured out something they didn't do naturally well, and they went and they got the proper prescription to compensate. So you gave an example. If you're relationship oriented, you don't want to surround yourself exclusively with people like you. You want to compensate by ensuring that your inner circle or your trusted advisors include some people that have a results bias.
Maybe go find yourself some goal setters and some problem solvers. And that's good.
And there are any number of ways, and you'll have to experiment with this the rest of your life, because unlike going to the eye doctor, there's not one of those things that, you can say this, or this. You're going to have to try some things. And it says, do these activities, these mechanisms help me compensate for my bias? And you can value both.
Yeah, and I think it's important to value both, because I think as you look at your organization or your team, there's a good chance that half your people are going to lean one way and the other half are going to lean. I mean, we're all wired up differently in it. I think if we can lock into that and really try to value both, I think the power is in that word "and."
Well, and speaking of the power of the "and," that's one thing that is so amazing about this concept. Some of our listeners have heard the name Jim Collins before, and Jim discovered this principle that he called the genius of the "and." And it's when an organization, at least he was studying organizations, they take two things that appear to be in conflict and at some points may be in conflict, and they embrace them both. They manage the tension, and then they benefit from the power created in the tension. Think about Toyota years ago when they said, we want to create low-cost, high-quality cars. We said, well, you can't do both. Well, they did.
And I think they sold more cars than anybody, maybe.
Yeah. And so this is the application of that same idea on an individual level. If we'll manage the tension, the genius of the and value results and relationships through a lot of effort, we'll release tremendous power.
I think it's one of those places where leaders are comfortable being uncomfortable. I mean, it's just times where we have that. Okay, so at the beginning, we talked about the iceberg, and you talked about some of the stuff on the top of the iceberg. There's an underneath side to that.
Yeah.
And it's just cloaked in fundamental number 5. Will you give us that one?
Yeah. So let me set it up. Let me add to your setup and say that those first 4 fundamentals are above the waterline, unapologetically. Those are the things that people see and experience and react and respond to. But they also react and respond to the 5th fundamental when we say you need to embody a leader's heart. And this is when you and I as leaders live and lead in such a fashion that people want to follow us. They want to follow us. And so those heart habits that we talk about in the book are the character traits that make people want to follow our leadership. Because here's the truth. You can have all the skills in the world, but if your heart's not right, nobody cares about your skills. And I think I can prove that to you. Think about a leader that you know who has the skills, but you're reluctant to follow them. In fact, you have chosen not to follow them. Well, why didn't you follow them? I think it's because you didn't trust their heart. Yeah. So the heart is central.
It starts with the heart, we think, for any leader.
Starts with the heart.
If you want to be a leader that others want to follow, you got to make sure that character piece is right. And I love those.
So let me give one. You gave a couple of very practical things at the end of each fundamental.
Yeah.
Let me give you one here, because let me acknowledge you got to work on your heart. Most of us have to work on our heart.
For sure.
And we've got to guard.
I'm in that class.
We've got to guard our heart.
Yeah.
And I want to give you something to think about. One of the heart habits, and I would say it's the most significant of the heart habits, is the ability to think others first. The best leaders cultivate that. Again, it might not be your first reaction. It might not be your first instinct. Now, somebody out there is going, yeah, how in the world would you do that? Well, in the book, we've got a lot of ideas for you, but let me give you one that you could try tomorrow, and I think it would change your day. What would happen if you tried to add value to every person you encounter? Now, the pragmatist listening to that says, wait a minute, that's impossible. I want you to listen carefully to my language. Try to add value. You will not add value to every person you meet, but it's the trying that changes you. Because when I'm trying to add value to someone else, who am I thinking about? Well, I'm not thinking about me, I'm thinking about them. And I would encourage you to make a list of every way you can think of to add value to others. You can stop when you get to about 100, because there are so many ways. A word of encouragement, a word of correction, provide a resource. I mean, on and on and on. A smile, a friendly gesture, If you're a person of faith, you might offer a silent prayer on their behalf. There's scores and scores and scores of ways you could add value. And if you'll try to do that with every person you meet, guess what will happen? You'll change your heart.
Yeah, that's good. I think one of the things you've taught me is when I'm thinking about someone else, I'm actually thinking about myself less. Not thinking less of myself. That's not what we're saying. But I think it's so important that when we begin to add value to others and think about how we can do that, it's so cool that we actually do think of ourselves a little less, which is, I think the world would be better if we all could live in that camp. So those are
the 5 fundamentals.
They're the 5 fundamentals. I'm excited about this book. It's coming out February 27th. We'll tell you more about it in just a second. But before we do that, I want to answer some questions.
Let's do some questions
that these guys have. And so if you have questions about anything in leadership, not maybe even something we talked about tonight, but I would encourage you just to feel free to share those questions, write them in here. I've got a couple of things. So if a person is listening here and they're saying, how would I implement this content with my team? What's the answer to that? What would you say? Where would you start if you don't have a common definition of leadership and you're wanting to embrace one? And this might be you want to put your toe in the water. Where would you start? What would you say?
So this is a great first question. For me to inject my standard disclaimer, I would not like anyone to misinterpret the brevity of my response with the magnitude of that question. Obviously, you can spend a lot of time answering that.
Right.
But when you say implement this with your team, I think you got to put some parameters around that. So let's define it a little more tightly. This may or may not be what you had in mind, but if you wanted to create a leadership culture, let's frame it like that.
Yep.
And I think we would define a leadership culture as a place where leaders are routinely and systematically developed. Like it's not an accident when it happens. It happens all the time. And you have a surplus. Well, the surplus lets you know that it's actually working and you've built the beginnings of a leadership bench. So if you want to create that, what I would say is step one is you have to have a common agreed upon definition of leadership. And you can choose our fundamentals, or you can choose John Maxwell's, or pick somebody else, or you can write your own. But you have to agree. That was the quagmire that we found ourselves in 25 years ago. We probably, there's 6,000 definitions in the world of leadership. We probably had 600 in our organization. And it was a mess.
And I was going to say, if you're listening tonight and you have 50 people in your organization, pass out index cards tomorrow and ask them, what's the definition of leader? And you'll end up with 50 more if you've not taken the time to really define this.
That's a great activity. I've done similar activities. And maybe it's just with your leadership team. Because, by the way, you said it earlier, if your leadership team's not clear on something, there's no way anybody else is clear, right?
For sure.
So just ask your leaders, what's our working definition of leadership? So I would start there. Now, there's a lot more you would do to create a leadership culture. This format doesn't allow us to get into that. We actually wrote a book on that called Leaders Made Here. So there are some steps you can take, but you have to begin with a common definition. I have never seen a leadership culture that didn't have a common definition of leadership.
Okay, so Mark, what would you say to the young leader? There's some young leaders listening. What would you say to the young leader when they're saying, what's the most important thing I can do to help my career grow? What would you say about that for an emerging leader, a young leader?
I would say if you want to have a successful career, I'd say two things. I'd love to have a longer conversation, a cup of coffee. But first, you need to make your boss wildly successful. I've given that advice for decades because I have team members in restaurants and other people around the world say, hey, what do I need to do to be successful?
Yeah.
Say, make your boss wildly successful. That'd be the first thing.
It's amazing. Let me interrupt here. It's amazing how many of these we just finished NFL playoff first weekend. All these guys they're winning, their coaches are winning, all their assistants are getting these jobs, right? I mean, so if you do great work for your company and help your boss succeed, you're usually going to have huge opportunities moving forward. So that's really good.
Yeah.
What else would you say? You said you had two.
Yeah, if you haven't made a commitment to lifelong learning, you really need to. Your capacity to grow will determine your capacity to lead. When you can't grow anymore, you can't grow your influence. I mean, you will create a ceiling for yourself if you don't make a commitment to lifelong learning. And there are probably other things I would say, but those are probably two that I'd say you could go a long way and make your ball. Let me one more. I can't help
go for it.
I would say focus on contribution over career. Not that you never think about your career, but the people who are contributing are the people who are building a career.
Yeah. I think, and we've heard this before, but I think when people just put their head down and do great work, it's amazing how they end up at a great spot. It's just.
Yeah. Now, by the way, that's an old school answer. And I've had a bunch of young people tell me they don't like that. And it is an old school answer. But when I see people succeeding, it's because they're adding value and they're contributing.
They fall in love with the work, find an area of passion. There's a lot of other things.
Yeah, we like I said, we need a cup of coffee.
We can make that. Exactly. You can call us. That's great. Okay, so here's a question. So what do we do to increase team member engagement or employee engagement without being perceived as a micromanager? Talk to that for a second.
Yeah, I would not necessarily put those together, because you can raise engagement independent. I mean, you might even could raise engagement if you were a micromanager, but we know that autonomy is one of the things that drives engagement. So if you're being too prescriptive and too controlling, you would probably depress engagement. I wouldn't put those, it feels like even the premise of that question, that's on a continuum.
Yeah.
I would say you don't need to be a micromanager because you have become the lid on whatever it is, right?
Yeah, and we've actually discovered, and some of the research we've done, that when you give people responsibility, their engagement actually goes up.
Yes,
I mean, so
for sure.
It is what you're saying. If we do begin to micromanage, we're
working against it.
We're working against what we're trying to do.
We're working against it.
Yeah.
But you really are trying to show people that you care and provide some of the things I referenced earlier. And when you connect with people and affirm people and give them real responsibility and create the right environment or context, when you care, they're going to care more. And engagement is really how much they care about the work, their coworkers, their customers, and the organization. And so don't be a micromanager and work on engagement.
Yeah.
It's like two things. They're separate things.
You talked about engaging and developing others. Will you talk here a second question about how important is it for us to invest in the next generation of leaders?
Well, I mean,
and by this, I think we're talking the younger generation.
Yeah, I think it's important, but I also think development should be owned by the individual. Now, if your organization will help you, fantastic. And if you're trying to choose an organization and you got several to choose from, I would certainly encourage you to lean toward the one that's going to help you grow and develop. But even if they don't do anything to help you, it's on you. You own your growth. You own your development. Again, it's a real perk if they'll help you, but you can't get to the end of your life, the end of your career, and go, I'd have done more and I'd have been more and I'd accomplished more if my company had paid for that course or my company had bought me a book. You want them to help you, but you've got to own it.
Yeah, and so look, I'll build on it with this question. What do I do if my boss doesn't do what you're talking about? So I guess their boss is not embracing this mindset, and here this person's feeling maybe trapped in this organization.
Sure. Okay. Let's go back to the advice I shared earlier. You want to try to help your boss be wildly successful. So I think that's step one. Step two, this took me way too many years to figure this out. There's something more important than being right, and it's called submission to authority. And if you've chosen to work for that man or that woman, and they're asking you to do something, maybe it's not going to work, but is it immoral, illegal, or unethical? If it's none of those, then under authority, you need to do what they've asked you to do, and then that's not on you, that's on them.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, you may not be in the right place. I mean, and I think we have to own that as well.
You can fire your boss.
You can fire your boss.
and I
know that I don't want to be flippant about that.
I don't either.
No, and but I'm just saying, if
you do get to choose where you work.
People do end up in the wrong job, and sometimes they end up in the wrong organization, and you may have to own that. But help them be successful, submit to their authority. And by the way, you can learn from bad bosses. I am so thankful. I've had very few.
Yeah.
And I learned so much from them, because then you know what you're going to do differently when it's your turn.
Well, and I want to jump in here and kind of throw my 2 cents into this conversation. I think some of this goes back to fundamental number one of seeing the future. So as you, Henry Cloud talks about playing the movie forward. How does this thing end if you continue to do what you've been doing and you don't feel like you're in an organization where you can grow? What does that look like a year, 2, 5 down the road? And at some point you've got to be honest with yourself that this is not my vision for where I'm going with my career. Maybe I have to make a hard decision at that point, but yeah, that's part of it as well.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about see the future as it applies to the individual and the individual. Self-leadership's the hardest leadership of all, for sure. But you got to care about that as well.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so another question. So could you give me one of those heart habits you were talking about? So what are, you said there are some heart habits.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you have other questions, we still have a couple more minutes here. Continue to send those in. But
well, I mentioned one.
Me and said, what are those heart habits?
One is think others first. That's a heart habit. Hunger for wisdom. I'll just rattle them off. Expect the best. That's a heart habit. A spirit of optimism.
Yeah.
Accept responsibility. The best leaders don't blame others. Now, if something goes wrong, they're going to accept it. But if things go well, they're going to share praise. That's a reflection of your heart. So those are some of the heart habits that we talk about. We talk about them in this book. We've actually written a separate book called The Heart of Leadership just about those heart habits.
All right. So I got here we go. So here's a question from a leader. Is there a leader in your own life that has shaped you in a big way? And what's your favorite leadership quality about that person?
Well, the answer is yes. There are many, many, many leaders who have shaped me. And so here, at the risk of, this will be a little bit of a spoiler. But I promise me you're going to read this. So I
usually don't know what you're going to say. And I usually know what you're going to say. I have no idea what you're about.
Well, there are many, 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 many leaders that have influenced me and shaped me. And yes. But I close this book with the leader that comes to the top of my mind who embodies all of the fundamentals.
Yeah, it's a great story.
And the interactions that I had with him over my career, and it's the late Truett Cathy. And so the last chapter is about Truett. So
that's great.
You'll have to read that to get more of the details.
All right, here's one from a leader. They say, we all have plenty of blind spots. Aside from firing your boss, advice on influencing a leader above you to see their blind spots that might be harming the team.
Well, we always talk about, we love the leaders that have our best interest at heart. We love the leaders that we can trust. We love the leaders that we believe really want us to win. I would encourage you to strive to create that same relationship with your boss so that you could sit down and go, hey, boss, can I tell you something? Mm-hmm. I think you're doing something that's hurting your team. I would love to have a relationship with you. You are my boss. He's the CEO. And I can say, Randy, that now at the end of the day, I've already told you, if he says, thanks for that, but we're going to do it my way, I say, yes, sir. If it's not immoral, illegal, or unethical, I'm under authority and I'm going to say yes. But I want to build the relationship that we can have a real conversation.
Yeah.
So that would be the goal.
Yeah.
And I don't think you do that necessarily quickly. You don't do that recklessly, but that would be the goal.
Well, I think you don't want to work somewhere if you don't feel like you have that level of trust that you can talk to each other. And Patrick Lencioni, I think, was the one who talked about the number one dysfunction of a team is the lack of trust. Mm-hmm. That they're not able to share with each other, that kind of stuff. And so if you're in that situation right now where you really don't feel like you can address that, maybe you ask why, and then at some point you do have to. You don't have to, but you need to have that conversation because you just can't get to where you want to go if you're not able to have that level of trust. So I think that's really great. Okay, so last question here. How hard was it to write this book? How hard was it to write this book?
Well, every book is a labor of love. I mean, I've never thought of myself as a writer.
And I was going to say, you're not a writer, but yeah, you have written, I think, 12, 13, I don't know how many you're at.
I know.
And by the way, congratulations. Your last one was just a Wall Street Journal bestseller. That was great. So you've turned into you used to sell chicken. Now you've turned into a writer.
I don't know.
But how hard was it?
Well, it was challenging because there's so much that we wanted to share. I mean, I put a team together, really smart people. You may have picked up on that theme. That's my MO. Build teams of really smart people. And there was so much we wanted to tell you, but we wanted to make it actionable. We wanted it to be far more actionable than what we've done tonight.
Yeah.
And so, whatever, 50,000 word count, I'm guessing at least 30,000 of this book, their tactics and their strategies and their best practices. So it's got a real practitioner's feel to it. But the hardest part was there was so much that we wanted to include. And so we did the best we could. And there'll be other resources to share ideas that currently, are on the cutting room floor. We've already created a field guide and a course and some other things you're going to talk about later.
I'm going to tell them about that. Yeah.
So that was what was hard, is trying to say, what is the minimum critical content that we could share to convey this truth? And so we've done our best, and I look forward to your feedback.
Yeah, that's great. One of the things I'm excited about is all the work we do. Really, we always ask ourselves, like, what do they need? How do we help leaders? Because we really do believe in a world well led. I mean, we know when leaders do what they're supposed to do, they get it right. It just makes it really great. And when leaders, if you've ever had a leader that wasn't getting it right, you know how hard that is. And so I just want to encourage you tonight to ask yourself, do you have a point of view on leadership? And I do want to tell you about the book. We have it here, and we've got a little offer for you tonight, which is really cool. We've designed it really for you. We've asked ourselves the question, is the book enough? And the book's great. Can't wait for it to come out February 27th. As Mark said, it's full of hundreds of things that you can do. But we really have tried to make it more practical than that, and we created a field guide that's got case studies and assessments and action items and all kind of stuff for you to do. And then there's also a little quick start guide that we've created. It's a little, I think it ended up being 80, 100 pages.
It's a pocket guide.
It's a pocket guide, though, a little thing with all kind of tips and tactics and things to make it really practical for you. And so we've created a bundle, and I think they're going to put up on the screen there the place you can go. It's Lead Every Day. Make sure I get this right. leadeveryday.com/uncommon-greatness-bundle. Yeah, there you go.
Well, that's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful.
But it's on the screen.
It's on the screen. It's there. We'll put it in the notes at the end.
And there's one more piece.
The bundle, there's a couple of things that you can do there. There's two options for you. There's a printed bundle where you'll get a hard copy of the book. You'll get the field guide, the quick start guide. And I didn't mention, Mark, you've created a course. And this course, tell us about that for a second. It's 25
modules,
video modules.
Of me walking through not just the fundamentals, but the best practices and key strategies that you can employ to bring them to life.
So you can bring this course into your team and build it into your organization. If you don't have a point of view on leadership in your team, your family, your organization, you really need to get a hold of this stuff. And so this digital bundle that we have, or the physical bundle, will also include the digital course. And then there's a digital bundle. If you say, I want all of it digital, you'll get the book, Kindle version or e-reader, and then you'll get a digital field guide, a digital quick start guide, and the digital course. That course alone is, I think, priced at $299. It's going to be over $350 worth of stuff. And so tonight we've got it for you. If you jump into our bundle, it's a $129 for the printed resources and $89 for the digital stuff. And if you do sign up tonight, we're going to actually give you early access to an assessment that we've created. And that assessment, it's world-class assessment, if I do say so. It's really great, the work that was done on that. It's going to help you calibrate where you are. It's just going to give you a plan for your leadership. And so if I could just encourage you to do anything, make this investment in yourself. This book is going to be, it's going to be another winner, Mark. I mean, you've done a great job with this. These other resources are what's going to help you activate and not just to read this book, but to really build it into your life and leadership. And so again, that digital bundle for $89, the printed bundle for $129, all that info is there at leadeveryday.com/ let me say it one more time, uncommon-greatness-bundle. And so if you'll go there, you can get all those. And again, we thank you for being with us tonight. So as we wrap up here, you got a final thought for us when it comes to this content?
I do. I wonder how many in our audience have seen the movie The Matrix. Now, I share this with just a bit of trepidation. I spoke to a bunch of young people recently, and I shared a story from Indiana Jones, and I was told afterwards that nobody knew who I was talking about.
That's been a while.
But I'm going to trust that some of you saw the movie The Matrix.
Or at least I've heard of it.
Well, I hope you saw it. All right, so there's a scene. I think it was the inciting incident in the whole movie. It's at the very beginning when Neo, the hero, meets Morpheus. And Morpheus offers Neo a choice. He has a red pill and a blue pill. He said, the red pill will give you new levels of clarity and awareness and so forth and so on. And the blue pill is you can just continue to live your life and believe whatever you want to believe. And Neo is about to make the choice. And Morpheus says, remember, all I'm offering you is the truth. That's what our team was trying to do when we created this book. We started it 25 years ago. We've taught this content all over the planet. There are over 500,000 or 600,000 copies of that first book in 25 languages out there. We came back 2 years ago, did research in 6 countries with another 4,000 leaders to do the quantitative work that we didn't do in the beginning. We did qualitative work. We put all that together, all in pursuit of truth. And that's what we've tried to share here in this book. And I want to encourage you. You were born for greatness. Whether you feel it or not, whether you own it or not, whether you acknowledge it or not, but it's within your reach. And I'm reminded of a quote from George Washington Carver. And he said that when we do the common things in life in an uncommon way, we will command the attention of the world. But there's something more important than commanding the attention of the world. If you will embrace these fundamentals and pursue uncommon greatness, you'll not just command the attention of the world, you can change your world. That's what great leaders do. And so we're excited to share this content with you and would love to serve you in the future. Just let us know how we can partner with you.
Yeah, if we can help you, reach out. Remember, the best leaders lead every day. We'll see you guys down the road.